Next up, we've got Lonely Freddy from Fetch. Now, this one is a mixed bag. We've got Alec and his sister that I forget the name of, which I apologize for. And basically, he doesn't like her. They have like a tension. She's like the little goody two-shoes to him. And basically, his perception of everyone is that everything is against him all the time. And that's a really interesting perspective for a protagonist. And basically, the whole story is kind of like a drama. And I've got mixed feelings about that. Basically, they make a deal to try and sort of even the score. She starts acting bad, he starts acting good. He thinks it's a trick, though, so he's trying to double-cross her down the line. He eventually tries that, and it goes wrong. He goes to a back room at Freddy's, so there is some tie-in there. It's not all just a sitcom. And he gets body-swapped with a little lonely Freddy. And yeah, this is a weird one. It is definitely carried by its characters. The characters are very good. Some of the best, I'd say. As far as story, pacing is a little bit weird. Relevance to Freddy's, the ending party is at Freddy Fazbear's, and Lonely Freddy, the namesake of the story, takes Alec's body. Aside from that, though, the horror aspect, probably medium. Having your body swapped with a robot, pretty scary stuff, but nothing overtly terrifying. I mean, it is terrifying, but for FNaF standards, it's okay. So, with that, Lonely Freddy, honestly, I think it's going to be our first C tier. And, again, I like all of the stories. Some are just better than others. Alright, room for one more. This story comes from 1:35 a.m., and this is about Stanley. Stanley works at the Sister Location bunker place that we see in Sister Location. And basically, he goes there, guards things, he falls asleep, there are mini arenas, he's like, oh, cool, a little mini arena, and over the course of the story, they start crawling down his throat and inside him, and he starts basically dying, and he doesn't want to see a doctor, which is a good way to fill the plot hole. He doesn't like doctors because his dad died in a hospital or something. So it's a good way to write that out of the story, because a logical thing would be if he's starting to feel bloated and really just not good, he would probably go see a doctor. So they write an explanation for that, which I appreciate. And basically, every night goes back there, gets some more of them inside him till he's about ready to explode, and he basically dies. And this is a story. First of all, story. The story itself is good. Stanley is pretty relatable. He's got some problems. His girlfriend dumped him. Again, we have the theme of and you really feel for him because he's a likable character. He's a likable protagonist. And just to see him devolve into this, I don't even know how to describe it. It is very, very high on the horror scale, and also very high on the FNaF relevance, because we see more characters straight from the games. So, this one, it's just... Was it better than one from 35 a.m.? I'd say yes. Is it better than Into the Pit? I'd say yes. Yeah, I think it's gonna go B tier. B tier below Bunny Call. That's where room for one more is. Oh boy, while I was reading it, just my throat hurt. Talking about it now, my throat hurts. Though that could be just because I've been talking for 20 minutes. Okay, Step Closer's Dance With Me. I don't like this one. I mean, I do. Like I said, I like all of them. But I don't really like this one that much. We've got Casey. She's a thief. She lives on the streets. She's a good character. And that is probably the best part about this story. She's an interesting, flawed character. Basically, she steals these cardboard glasses from a kid at Circus Baby's Pizza World, and she starts seeing invisible Ballora following her. And basically, she tries to turn her life around and stop, thieverying, kleptomaniacking, stealing, basically. And the Ballora gets closer and closer and closer, and she eventually has this conflict at a shop where this old lady pays for something that she was about to steal. So it's heartwarming, sure. And then she goes to the owner of the glasses originally and returns pretty much everything she stole. She's trying to turn over a new leaf. And Ballora dances with the girl who the glasses were stolen from. So, overall, confusing ending. I'd say, I don't even know what Ballora's supposed to be doing. She is invisible and not just like a hologram, though, because she has effects on her surroundings. It's a more confusing one. And overall, zero horror, honestly. This one doesn't really have a threat, other than Ballora getting closer, and you don't know what she's going to do. Other than that, there's nothing to imply that she's going to, like, kill Casey, except that it's the fact that it's Ballora. Honestly, Casey carries the story, but she doesn't carry it enough. And it's going to be our first and potentially only D tier. So, I said potentially only D tier, but next up we have In the Flesh. This is a story. You've no doubt heard of it if you have followed this book series, because it's a very disturbing story. We've got Matt, certified scumbag of a protagonist, which is a nice change of pace for these stories. And he's working on a VR game with Springtrap. Sound familiar? FNaF VR. Pretty easy to make the connections there. And basically, he's just an absolute scumbag. He goes on these dates. He thinks all the women are delusional for not being with him. But even though he's a scumbag, like, I can't stress that enough. This guy is an absolute terrible person. And eventually he starts losing it. He pours his rage into the program. Human emotion, once again coming into play there. Springtrap basically becomes sentient. And then comes the weird part, because Springtrap becomes real. But he doesn't escape into the real world like Glitchtrap, where he sort of just possesses your mind. He physically gets into the real world through Matt. Yeah, it's weird. I'm not even going to describe it. If you know, you know. If you know, you know. So with that, horror is very high, because that is borderline not good to have in the story. But Matt being an interesting character, as far as him being a scumbag, and the story in general, I'd say, is it a high D, or is it a low C? Has high relevance to FNaF, has some good characters, pretty good paced story, really short though, and extremely high horror to a point where it might push it down on the scale. So in general, I think it's going to be a low C. With that out of the way, we've got all of the second stories done. Now we are on to the third stories of each book. Now this is where things get real. This is where we have some of the best stories. And I'm just going to get right into it. They're longer, they're usually more lore heavy, they have great characters. So let's just go. Starting off with Into the Pit's Count the Ways. We've got Millie. She's an edgy goth girl who likes death. And she's basically just very emo. And a lot of people don't like her for this, but again, character variety is good. So I liked Millie as a character, and she falls in love. Well, she gets a crush on this Dylan guy, fellow edgy lad. Turns out he's got a girlfriend. She loses it. She doesn't like that Christmas is coming up and all. That's kind of an interesting subplot, I guess. She's got her grandpa, very nice character, very wholesome character. But here's where it gets interesting, because she goes into the garage. Her grandpa's like a collector. She finds Funtime Freddy, like an old, decrepit Funtime Freddy. And she, for whatever reason, crawls inside the chest cavity of it, because Funtime Freddy has that, but it closes. I actually forgot how she gets in there. I think she went in there to hide, but honestly, it's been a while since I read it. Funtime Freddy then proceeds to wake up and toy with her, giving her options of how he's going to kill her, hence count the ways. Count the ways he could kill her. And it's a lot, I'll tell you that. The way that it's structured is that it actually starts off with her inside it, and the story is conveyed through a series of flashbacks. And I think that is a very clever and interesting way to tell the story, because we get teasing of what's going on, we get flashback, a little bit of context, and we basically go back and forth until the end. Now, Millie has this plan to potentially escape. She chooses decapitation, and bets that she can crouch down low enough to have the blade pass over her head. And this is where the story gets its most interesting quality, because we don't know if she made it. The story ends with the blade swinging. Now, a lot of people think that she dies, and that's fair enough. It's left up to the reader. However, I like to think that she survived, because her plan actually seemed pretty decent. Whether she escaped Funtime Freddy after that, who knows? I like to think she did, because I'm an optimist, but we'll never know. So, count the ways. Good characters. Funtime Freddy is... you can just hear his voice in the pages. He's written very well. Millie, a pretty good protagonist. The grandpa guy, very wholesome. Story, pretty good. It could get a little cheesy at points for some people, but I didn't really have a problem with that. Relevance to FNaF, very high. Horror, pretty high as well. You're trapped inside a bear that's telling you how it's going to kill you. With that all said, I think Count the Ways is going to be between Fetch and To Be Beautiful. Very solid A-tier story. When I finished reading it, I was very satisfied, and it was a great taste of what was to come, as well as rounding off Into the Pit as the first book in the series. Next up, we've got Out of Stock, and my opinions on this may be controversial, because I know Underscore, fellow FNaF YouTuber, I don't know if I'd say that, because I don't know if I'm a FNaF YouTuber, I'm kind of variety, but a FNaF YouTuber I'm friends with, he really likes this story, and I'm just gonna say right now, I don't. This one's about Plush Trap. Now, we've got, what's his name? Oscar? What was his name? Oscar? It wasn't Oscar, was it? It might have been Oscar. I don't remember the kid's name. That's not a good sign. Basically, he's poor, his mom works with old people, and he wants this plush trap chaser, but he can't really afford it. But he finally gets enough money to afford it, but it's gonna be out of stock. And he goes there after getting delayed with his friends, and they're all gone right as he makes it up to the desk. But he overhears some employees talking about this plush trap chaser that's a little different. So he goes over there, and he basically steals it. He leaves some money, but he steals it. And he and his friends go back to their house. He tries to get it to work. They realize it's got human eyes and human teeth. And I'm not saying, like, they're made to resemble human eyes and human teeth. I'm saying these are literally human eyes and human teeth that are in this toy. So it doesn't work at first, then there's a big storm, sends a shock of electricity into the plush trap, and basically from there, he and his friends, protagonist boy, they have to survive against the plush trap. And that's a pretty cool concept, I will admit that. It can chew through almost everything and stops when they shine the light on it. And that's cool. And they eventually lead it out onto train tracks, gets hit by a train. There's the end of that. So it does have a happy ending, which I can appreciate, but at the same time, wasn't really that interesting to me. The characters are okay. There's nothing too compelling about them, personally. The main character has this sort of thing where he can't really do kid things anymore because his dad died or something. I think that's what happened, if I remember correctly. So there is that, the feeling of never really getting to do anything, and that, like, it's just against him all the time. Other than that, story pretty slow at first. The climax with Plush Trap was pretty interesting. Relevance to FNaF, pretty high. Horror, okay, decent. The human eyes and human teeth thing is a little creepy. Plush Trap threatening to maybe, like, chop you up. Also pretty spooky, but overall, it's a meh for me. So I think it's gonna be a mid-C tier. So with that, we finished Into the Pit, which are B and A tiers, and Fetch, which is a kind of uneven split between A and C tier stories. Next up, we've got The New Kid from 1:35 a.m. This is a weird one. This is a weird one. It's stumped people. Nobody's really solved it. We've got Devin, we've got, what's his name, Mick, I think? And then we've got Kelsey. Kelsey's the new kid. Basically, there's a lot of drama. Devin's kind of a psychopath. Just mildly a psychopath. So that's a very interesting main character concept. It's a hard story to explain, but basically, Devin tries to get Kelsey stuck in the golden Freddy suit. The spring locks go off. Probably one of the best scenes of the series so far, because spring lock failure is such an interesting concept, and we get it fully described in this book. And basically, Kelsey is dead. Devin and Mick have to live with that for a while, but they really can't. They need to go check if he's still alive somehow. And so Devin goes, he tries to check inside the Golden Freddy head, but he gets his arm stuck. It clamps down, breaks his arm, and he starts bleeding and stuff. And he looks inside, and Kelsey's not there. It's someone else. And this is obviously the kid who was killed inside the Golden Freddy suit. But then the story ends with Kelsey alive at a different school, sort of rinse and repeating the whole thing that he did with Devin and Mick. So Kelsey is either another spirit, or he's a projection, but it's just a weird story. Weird, but good. The New Kid is a good story. I don't know what to say about it. It's very confusing. It's very relevant to FNaF. Has pretty decent horror, good characters, and a good story. So that does check all the boxes. But as far as personal opinion, it still doesn't quite beat Fetch. And now you're probably thinking, like, what does this guy have with Fetch? Why is he so obsessed with Fetch? But guys, I assure you, these next two stories are gonna knock it out of the park. I don't know, baseball metaphors? What am I doing baseball metaphors for? I don't know. Step Closer's Coming Home. This story is so good. I cannot express how good this story is. It hard carried Step Closer as a book. It's just absolutely insane. We've got Susie, who's hanging out with her family. Her family seems to be ignoring her. And then there's the twist that she is dead. She is a ghost. She was killed in the missing children's incident by Purple Guy. Now for me, as soon as I heard that it was Susie, I kind of knew this, but it doesn't make the twist any less powerful. It is such a good twist, such a good concept to have the main character of the story be dead and not really even know it herself. She kind of knows, but she can't really remember. But basically, her sister can kind of see her, can kind of feel her presence and see the things she's interacting with. But every night, Chica, the animatronic, comes to their house, and Susie has to go back to Freddy's at 12 a.m. It's bittersweet, it's emotional, it's sad, and the end scene where Susie and Samantha are able to see each other and hug one last time before Chica takes Susie back for good is honestly just a good moment. And it was such a good story to read. FNaF relevance? FNaF relevance for this one. There may be zero horror, but the FNaF relevance, the characters, the story, and the low complexity level just send this skyrocketing up to S tier. Coming Home is an S tier story, and I think most people agree with that, but I cannot stress it enough. Coming Home is fantastic. But is there one final story that could potentially rival it? That's right. I'm talking about Bunny Calls The Man in Room 1280. Now, this is also an amazing story. And first of all, I just want to talk about the title. The titles of these stories have been ranging from okay to pretty decent, but The Man in Room 1280 is such a chilling title. It sounds like a creepypasta. It sounds like an unsolved mystery. It radiates this sense of dread, but also intrigue. And that's exactly what the story has, because this is the first time, to my knowledge, that we see this book series version of William Afton. And he is messed up. He is barely alive. He would not be alive if not for something that we're going to talk about in a little bit. He is a charred corpse with organs that are still functioning loosely. He's got this crusty skin all over him, and he has this stench. Now, the story takes place in Heracles Hospital, where a priest named Father Arthur Blythe is trying to figure out what's up with this guy, and if he can be, if he has, like, good in him, if he can be, like, contacted and sort of figured out, because this is a very strange thing. He is able to communicate with it, and William Afton tells him he wants to go to Fazbear Entertainment Distribution Center. I don't know why I took so long to say distribution. And that's awesome in and of itself. We get to see sort of almost like a headquarters of Fazbear Entertainment, which we've never really seen before. And basically the nurses there, they know. They know that this guy is trouble. They know that William Afton should not be allowed this wish. But it's a conflict, because you want to be on Arthur's side here. You don't want him to be let down, because he's an optimist. He's a really wholesome character. But you have the dramatic irony of knowing that this is William Afton. And if he somehow is still alive, that spells a lot of trouble for any nearby kids. So the nurses, with the exception of Mia, who's a character who Arthur interacts with, and she's a pretty good character as well, the nurses go through these plans to try and kill the man in room 1280, but they're stopped by the shadow of a little boy in an alligator mask. And this is Andrew, one of William Afton's victims, who we're going to get back to later when we talk about the Stitchwraith stories. And he's keeping him alive, and he's tormenting him with these nightmares. Now, this could be an explanation for Ultimate Custom Night, and I think it's strongly hinted at. It's just a good story. The nurses all fail in their attempts to kill William Afton, and Arthur Blythe is able to fulfill the request and take him to Fazbear Entertainment Distribution Center, where, for some reason, and I have a theory, Andrew, the spirit, is able to free himself from William Afton's body and kill him by William Afton just sort of shaking and then exploding. He explodes, and like bits of him go everywhere. It's kind of messy, and there are footprints, bloody footprints of a child leading away from it. Once again, FNaF relevancy is out of here. It is in the sky. There's so much here. There's so many references and lore hidden in this story. The characters are really compelling. We got Arthur, very wholesome. Mia, kind of like someone who the audience can get in the head of, because she's new to the hospital, and we're seeing her perspective as well. We got the nurses, who have a bit of backstory themselves and are also pretty interesting characters. And we've got William Afton is here. And it's just such a good story. This is exactly what I was hoping for when we're talking about FNaF short stories. So this is an S tier. But does it beat Coming Home? And I don't know. I think I have to put these two at a tie. I think Coming Home and The Man in Room 1280 are tied for the best stories in this series so far. And wow, they are good. And that's basically the tier list for all the main stories. You can look at that right now. It's my opinions on it. Now, quickly, we're going to go through the Stitchwraith stories, which are kind of post-credit scenes for each book that sort of are building up to a bigger story. So because of that, I can't really rank them that well. But just for the sake of it, we're going to do it pretty quickly. Stitchwraith 1. This is where it introduces the Stitchwraith. It's a detective going over case files for it and stuff. Good build-up, nice mystery, but it's C tier. There's not much there. Stitchwraith 2. I think this is where the Stitchwraith is collecting bits of plush trap off of the railroad. This homeless guy is watching him, and the detective gets some more work in as far as figuring out what this guy is. And we don't know at this point either. Again, not great. It's a build-up. It's definitely a build-up, and it's gonna be B tier, but where? I think it's gonna be lowest B tier. Stitchwraith 3. This is where it gets interesting, because this is where we learn the origins of Stitchwraith. Phineas Taggart is collecting the items that we've been seeing throughout the books and taking out their emotional energy, because he's studying like agony and like he's studying human emotions and their effect on the world of FNaF, and he pours those into the vessel of Stitchwraith, which then kills him. And this one is a good one. This is a good one. This is going to be A tier, because it explains a lot. Stitchwraith 4, this is where we get introduced to Jake and Andrew, who are two of the souls inside the Stitchwraith. But basically, Jake and Andrew are meeting each other, they're vibing. Not really, Andrew's kind of a jerk, but at the end it's hinted that there may be someone else in there. And with the man in room 1280, I think it's implied that William Afton may be also inside the Stitchwraith, which is pretty crazy. It's gonna be another A tier, but higher than the other Stitchwraith one. And now we've got Stitchwraith 5. This is a really sad one, because Jake almost gets to move on. He's destroying all the things that Andrew has infected along the way, because he's been the cause of Fetch, I think it's implied that he's the cause of the Ella doll. There's a lot of things that Andrew has been influencing over the course of the stories. So Jake is getting rid of all of that stuff, but he almost gets sucked back into a memory of his past. And it's sad because he almost gets to move on, but he comes back down because Andrew needs him. He made a new friend, and he doesn't want Andrew to be alone. This is going to be another A tier. It's going to be the highest A tier of the Stitchwraith stories. There we go. The Fazbear Frights books, 1 through 5, from Into the Pit to Bunny Call and everything in between. This is my tier list. Feel free to disagree with it. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Please like the video, subscribe, or at least consider it. Join the Discord. We have fun there. But yeah, with that all said, bye!